He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he is the host of the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We welcome Dane Moore onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Dane?
Good, Justin. Thank you for having me. Always down to chat some poop.
Nice. So, some late breaking news that has happened, I believe, a couple of minutes ago, dealing with Malik Beasley. He was just sentenced to, I believe, 120 days. I believe to serve his sentence to a October charge. And I just wanted to ask you, this last night, he had a monster game against the Dallas Mavericks. And I was listening to your podcast. I believe in your opinion, you believe he plays a massive role with the Timberwolves with Karl-Anthony Towns being out. And then with him being gone for this foreseeable amount of time, and we're not even counting the NBA possibly taking action towards him. What kind of a hit is this to the Minnesota Timberwolves? I know they're last at the Western Conference, so how bad can things possibly get? But what do you think the ramifications are with him missing a lot of time potentially?
We're starting on a somber note here. No. So to clear a few things up,
Sure.
The 120 days that he's going to have to serve won't start until the summer after the
Got
season.
it. Okay, understood.
So this has been expected.
Okay.
This was coming for a while now. Without litigating the whole litigation process. This was expected, and the league has been waiting for a sentencing to come before laying down a suspension on Malik. And so I don't know when exactly that will be, but I've heard a couple games are probably going to be levied against him. But that, like you said, that's kind of been par for the course this year with the Wolves. They missed Karl-Anthony Towns for 20 of the 24 games. D'Angelo Russell's been in and out of the lineup. And they've really fallen apart this year. But the one solid part of this team, night in and night out, has been Malik Beasley, and he's been incredible and very consistent. A player that would be very, very good on any team in the NBA because he is an elite shooter, and that was kind of, I think, only theoretical maybe. Kind of coming into the year, people saw a little bit of what he did in Denver, or like the 14 games after the trade deadline last year, and now people are seeing like, oh no, this guy's legit, and he's been massive this year, and he's become the best player and the leader of the Timberwolves this year.
What do you make of this season overall in terms of, I guess, taking the record seriously of teams that are struggling just because of the pandemic? Under normal circumstances, I think it's safely to say it's fair to judge a team performing pretty poorly at the beginning of the season to see how it's going to result after the AllStar break, et cetera. But we have teams missing games because of COVID. We just have, the other players are affected through contract tracing. Even though the Timberwolves, granted, they are struggling, is it fair to really hammer them in terms of their struggles? Or is it possibly fair just to give them a pass this season and to really just kind of see if they can become more cohesive and then judge them next season when things are a lot more stable, possibly?
Yeah, you have to adjust expectations, right? For the Wolves, Karl-Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell have been on the same team for over a year now, and they've only played in 5 games together.
Yeah.
So it would be illogical to not account for that. At the same time, I don't want to get too carried away and delete expectations for this team and forgive everything. I don't think they should clearly be the worst team in the NBA, and they've clearly been the worst team in the NBA. You should be held accountable for that, to some degree. But I think it is very important to understand for people who are not watching the Timberwolves day in, day out, that the way their roster is constructed, the way their offensive system is constructed, and the way their defensive system is constructed is totally based on Karl-Anthony Towns. So you remove him from the picture, and to me, it's not surprising to see the bottom fall out. They didn't have a backup infrastructure in place here to not have a guy who can shoot 10 threes in a game and make 40% of them, to not have a rim defender. They don't have any other big players on their team. So am I surprised that they're getting destroyed in the paint? No. And offensively, like, okay, you were supposed to have a team that was predicated on high ball screen action with Towns and Rubio or Towns and Russell. Well, now you're asking Russell and Rubio to be independent isolators. That's not their skill sets. Like I'm not in the least surprised that they've removed Karl Towns from the lineup for 20 games, that they've become a terrible team. But there's got to be like some pride there. You've still got to see progress over the course of the year. I think that's the duty of the coach, the duty of the players, the duty of the front office. And it's kind of debatable whether or not we've seen that.
And speaking of Karl-Anthony Towns, I dare to say he's been hit by the pandemic the most in terms of his family. When he does make his return, and this might be an unfair question to ask, but from this a mental standpoint, how do you think will be able to cope with that, knowing that he I believe got COVID himself, and it's everything he's been through, with just being on the court be kind of a refuge for him to kind of escape all that and to really pour all of his energy into just to helping this Timberwolves this season? Or do you think this might be a lingering thing which might affect his performance on the court due to all these outside factors?
Well, he has said on the record that basketball is therapy and basketball will not be a refuge for him. He said that before the season. And so his answer is more important than mine.
Sure, absolutely.
But I think it will be. I think that's human nature. I think there's power in distraction. And I think there's power in, doing something you love. So I would, for his sake, I would hope that Karl is able to find some refuge in this, and is able to have some fun, man. Because he hasn't been, I don't know. A lot of people don't follow the Timberwolves very closely, but being at Target Center night in, night out around him for years now, this hasn't been very fun for him for a while. Really dating back to before the Jimmy Butler era. Karl used to be a lot more joyful than what we see lately. And there's a bunch of different factors that contribute to that, but he's a really nice person, man. He's a good kid. And, I want him to be happier. And I hope that basketball can play a role in it, because this team certainly needs him to do that.
For sure. Yeah, he has a very friendly demeanor, and also he comes off very relatable. Just I saw a video with him, I believe some tech YouTubers built him his own computer for her playing. I guess he's a big gamer, so he just seems very relatable to just a common fan. I want to get to Anthony Edwards. He struggled for the beginning of the season, around 16 games. It's really picked it up, averaging around 18 points a game fairly lately. What do you make of his progress so far, and do you see him perhaps being a contributing role on this team, and maybe picking up the spirits of Karl-Anthony Towns as, hey, this is this new guy, this new component on this team? What do you make of his progress so far?
I mean, he's just a really fun kid too. He's been one of the bright spots just for us. It stinks not being able to be in the locker room and stuff anymore, sure. Right? And to that end, haven't really got to know him that much, but he's great in these Zoom interviews and stuff that we do, and yeah, just an enigmatic personality. And I am excited to see how that meshes, because I'm a big believer that personalities matter in roster construction, and in the big picture, it should really matter how Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns then relate, and D'Lo and Malik and all that. So I'm excited to see that. But yeah, for Anthony, it's been what a weird year to come to the NBA. When I talk to people or have been talking to people around the league over the course of Edwards' time here, that's just at the beginning, well, what can you expect? I mean, without the summer league, and I think people forget that it normally goes summer league, and then you go to your city for a while, the end of summer / fall, and you're working out there the whole time. Then you have an extended month-long training camp, and then you go start playing a longer preseason. And for him, no summer league. You missed that window in there of 2 months of being around the team. Plus, training camp didn't exist. They played 3 preseason games. So it's he just wasn't going to be able to be what he is right now at the beginning of the season. So I do think it's encouraging. We've seen development from him. He's clearly freaky physically, and I think he's starting to iron out some of the things that weren't contributing to winning at the beginning of the year: shot selection, shooting poor percentage, getting, losing his man on defense a lot. Like some of those sort of things are slowly starting to, to go away. And I'm just curious to see when he's puts it together enough so he's clearly a winning player night in, night out, because they can't really afford to have these 4 for 16 shooting performances every other night if he's going to be one of the main contributors. You're probably going to lose if your main guy shooting the most shots is making 20-25% of them. So there's more development to be had there, but I don't think you can. I don't think anybody can look at what Edwards has done this year and be disappointed.
And I wanted to ask you, just because a lot of the guests, I posed this question to them in terms of what it's like covering the NBA in midst of this pandemic, and most of them had kind of negative things, just depressing things to say. So
I'll give you some positives.
Yeah,
give you some positives.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are the positives? Yeah, absolutely. Please.
You can do so much more. You can, I mean, whether you're a writer or a podcaster or any sort of content creation. I mean, I think what people probably don't understand, if you are a beat media person, how much time you spend at the facility during normal times. You're there at practice, you're there before practice, you're waiting to get your time in there. At games, get to games at 4:00. You don't leave the game until 11:00. I mean, there's so much time spent at the facility during normal times, which is great. I love all that. But you cut that all out now, and instead of needing to drive down to the facility to be there at shoot around at 11 in the morning, I could roll out of bed at 10:30 and sit down here on my computer, and it's the exact same thing. So it should be. I think as a fan of the NBA, a consumer, you should be expecting more and better content from your content producers, because, well, more content, maybe not better, because we don't have the access as much, and I think that hurts. I obviously feel like I'm the least in relationship with the players this year than I have been any other year, but I don't know. I mean, it's easier to do, and it's more accessible with the video from just they send us the video of the Zoom afterwards. We could clip it and put it on YouTube or put it on social media and all those sort of things. So I don't know. I mean, it's a situation where you have to make the best of it, but there is a make the best of it that is possible.
What type of things, once the pandemic is over, would you like to stick around in terms of how this paradigm is for you talking to the players? Like, once things get back to normal, are there any things hey, this is cool, let's stick with this, even when things get back to normal?
I think we'll all be much more comfortable with Zoom. Okay. And so I think I think for example, for me with my podcast, I used to always do it in studio, prior to this, or in person with somebody with my remote gear. And now, I was like, we're doing it over Zoom. That will make it you talk, I talk. But now I feel like we've all become very comfortable with that, myself and the players too. So I think it'd be very, be a lot easier in the future if I wanted to have a player on to do an interview or something like that, just be like, I'll shoot you the Zoom link, and we'll do that. That I think we've all built some comfort with that. As far as access goes, as a reporter, it's very important for me and my colleagues livelihood to be able to provide some inside information. Sure. That's what you're paying us for, and really not that much of this is staying behind the curtain. So I kind of want more of it to go back that way selfishly. But yeah, I think all of these media sessions should always be recorded and put on YouTube and stuff, and put on social media so people can see. I feel like this year everyone's oh, here's Draymond Green talking post game. Normally that would be only if somebody had a cell phone camera and we got the side of his chin or something like that. This is, I don't know, it's 2021. It's put some cameras in front of people when they have microphones. I don't know,
Sure.
like that didn't happen a lot of the time before. We would just be holding our little plastic recorders in front of people, no cameras. So then we have to, transcribe the quote and put it on Twitter or something or in our articles. People are like, well, I wish I could have seen him say that. So cameras should stick around permanently.
For sure. And just finally, we're approaching possibly seeing an all-star game. There's been opposition. There's been positivity towards having this. Where's your position on this? Just because there's been some proposals in terms of the game benefiting historically black colleges and the pandemic relief, but as shown by several players, including LeBron James, they are not down in playing this game at all. So do you think it's best for the fans and the league as a whole to actually have some kind of an all-star game? And two, do you think it's fair to the players to actually proceed as normally would with an all-star game? And not only that, but I even heard there might be still a slam dunk and a three-point competition, which is just wild to me. But what do you make of that?
So I think it's important for people to know what life is like for the players today in comparison to what it is like normally. And obviously they got millions and millions of dollars to do this. So they could deal with hardship. But at the same time, I think it's important to know that when they go on, the Wolves just went to Golden State for 2 games against the Warriors last week, and California's super shut down. So I think they were there for 4 or 5 days, and the players are literally not allowed to leave their hotel room unless they're at the stadium for the game. And that's a lot of these road trips for these players. And to some extent, even though they're getting millions of dollars for that, they are living very, secluded lives. They're having to show up at the facility at 7 a.m. every day to take tests and all this and that. I think it's reasonable to just give the players a week off and not do the All-Star game, to that end. Or I think it should be up to them. Put it like that. If Bron speaks for everyone and that's what his stance is on it. I don't know if they want to do it. If they want to do it for the benefit of the pandemic, for the benefit of HBCUs, then yeah, then do it. But that should be. Those are obviously great things. But I don't know. In this case, I kind of side with the players and let them choose. Let's have some discourse here between the Players Association and. I mean, there must be a discourse going on, but. Why it is weird to hear Bron so opposed to it.
Yeah, it's bizarre because Chris Paul is the head of the Players Association, and I was under the impression, at least from a media standpoint, that they're really good friends. So just to see them kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum on that is just bizarre.
I think CP sees the dollar signs or understands the dollar signs a little bit more because at the end of the day, right? There's all this revenue in the league. There's $3 billion, right, on a normal year, and the players get 51% of it, and the owners get 49% of it.
Sure.
So it's Chris Paul goes, well, we're gonna. I don't know what the numbers are. If he says there's going to be another $250 million put into that pot if we do an All-Star game, and he's I can do the math on that. That's 125 for us. I think that's an important thing in general for people to understand with all of this is that. The NBA is losing it. It doesn't have a lot of revenue here this year, and that's not just for the owners. Literally half of that is impacts the players too. So it makes sense for them to want to be scrapping back $100 million here and $100 million there. They want to get paid what their salaries say.
For sure. Well, Dane, thank you very much for joining me and chatting some Timberwolves. Really appreciate it. Please plug where our listeners and viewers can find you on social media and what else you're working on, in inclusion of your podcast that you're doing.
Yeah. So this year I'm covering the Timberwolves full time via podcast, which is new and different, but very pandemic. So my podcast is all Timberwolves focused, and I take the approach I bring to it is the same way the approach I brought to beat writing, which is I use quotes and stuff on gamers from players and just plug in the audio rather than writing in the quotes like I used to. And then I do longer form things like I would columns as well. So I'm having fun trying something new this year. That's the Dane Moore NBA podcast for all my Timberwolves coverage. And you can just follow me on Twitter at Dane Moore NBA.
Awesome. Thanks, Dane, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Thank you.